Sisters whose lives were taken, memories of you we sing. Sisters whose lives were taken, memories of you we sing. Note, chord, melody, harmony, song. Prayers we offer with tears of, with words we give high, we lift your spirits up, so you may know, so you may know, so they know forever joy.
Jaquarius Holland,
Aquarius Holland,
China Gibson,
China Gibson,
Ty Underwood,
Ty Underwood,
Penny Proud,
Penny Proud,
Crystal Edmonds,
Crystal Edmonds,
Islan Nettles,
Islam Nettles,
Angel Rose,
Angel Rose,
Lexi,
Lexi,
Leila Pelay Sanchez,
Pelay Sanchez,
Malaysia Booker,
Malaysia Booker,
Brianna B.B. Hill,
Brianna B.B. Hill,
Leilene Polanco,
Leilene Polanco. May your smiles remain eternal. May justice be bright. With this refrain. May your smiles remain eternal. May justice be bright. With this refrain. Sisters, we hold sacred. We hold sacred. Your names.
Hi, Mari. It is so great to be here with you tonight. And it is so great to be talking with you right after we have all just heard this groundbreaking piece that you wrote years ago now. I was thinking about it when I was getting ready for this project. Like the call for commissions for this commission went out like in 2018 or something, like way before the pandemic. And now we're finally getting to like observe this piece take on the life that it deserves. And yeah, I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you are experiencing and feeling this piece now, looking backward on it. Like how are you feeling about this piece?
Well, we're in November, and you know, the LGBT community is looking forward to T-Door, of course. But it's one of those things, like I would love this piece of music to be performed every year. And I would love it to be performed when it's not Tudor.
Okay.
Because this piece begets a conversation that needs to be had everywhere at all times of year.
Yes.
So it's opportune for now, but I hope that I would be fortunate to have this piece become part of the repertoire, you know? And I really feel that way about most of the music that I write, but this is how I've explained this piece in the past or in recent months has been that this is not the, but a say their names piece dedicated to specifically Black and brown trans women from the United States.
Yes.
And the text is by a Black and Indigenous playwright poet named Dane Figueroa Didi, Lady Dane. And she's written a lot. She's written books, plays. Y'all should all go look her up because she has a lot to say. And, you know, with this poem, she sent it to me in a text and there were not any names. But the name of the work was We Hold Your Name Sacred. And so she delivered everything, and I did not ask her to change anything except to add names. And maybe that was sort of unfair on my part. I felt very out of place, and maybe she felt out of place too, deciding which names to include. But part of the process, not only of like creating the score, but just like starting from zero for me, was to do some research into the lives of the women mentioned in the piece. And what's fascinating is that when you read their stories, aside from learning about their contributions to their communities and their art and their dreams and aspirations, just like the people that they were, when you look at their murders, you see a variety of, I guess, opponents, or a variety of things that are just around us all the time that are trying to kill them. That sounds kind of blunt, but I don't just mean like gun violence by a lover. Like, I think that storyline is very prevalent, and there's a whole conversation about masculinity that needs to be had. And even within the Black community, which I don't feel like I'm in a place to discuss. And probably most people who sing this piece will not feel like they're in a place to discuss. But there are those conversations, but there's also conversations about incarceration. And I don't want to get the story mismatched with the name, but one of the names mentioned, I think it was, I don't want to mess it up. I can go look it up, but one of the names mentioned is somebody who is held in Rikers Island, which is in New York. And when she came in, I think her crime was that she couldn't pay bail. It was like $500. And when she came into the jail, they informed the staff at the prison that she had seizures, and they basically neglected her, and she died from a seizure in her cell, and found her like hours after it had happened. And it was just like that is not one of those gun violence stories, but it's just like there's so many different things that exist as systemic barriers for Black trans folks. And we have to fight the battle on all fronts.
Yes.
And I think this is why the phrase Black trans lives matter resonates, because you'll see some people organizing for Black liberation, and you'll see some people organizing for trans liberation. But when you don't have both, what you end up with is a bunch of white LGBTQ people fighting for liberation, but not including Black people.
Yes.
Or you have Black people, Black cis people, who are not showing up for their trans siblings, even though when we look at our movements on the ground, local organizations and whatnot, even here in Dallas, there's numerous, and they're led by Black trans women.
Okay,
so it's just like, I'm learning a lot before I even like put my pencil down on staff paper to like sketch out my ideas. And so this is why I say it's a privilege to work with somebody like Dame Figueroa Didi, because she has a perspective that is very specific and that cannot be like, she's a teacher. Like, she has a lot to not only share in terms of her art, but just like educate. And frankly, I've learned a lot just about my sisters in the process of writing this. I hope I haven't rambled too much, but it's just like, it's dense. There's a lot going on before the words hit the page and before you take them in, internalize them, and then sing them into music.
It's so refreshing to hear you talk about this piece in this way, because I think it can be easy for people to think superficially about this piece, and also honestly about like Trans Day of Resilience Remembrance in general, you know, like it is really easy. I mean, one critique of TDOR as a thing is that it's an opportunity for cis people to show up and then cry for a day and then like move on with their lives without ever thinking about transness. And of course, like my experience is that I have become numb to transphobia, you know, like I'm moving through transphobia all the time, just like very basic transphobia of like being misgendered and, you know, whatever. We know the things. And I also am in accountable relationship to young people who are in the state of Arizona, which is incredibly hostile towards trans people, especially trans young people. And so, yeah, what I think about when I hear you talk is like, we know these names of the people who are written in your piece, and there are many names that we don't know of people who have been trans people who have been murdered, especially Black trans people. And there are also people who are surviving, who are like persisting through just profound transphobia, whose stories that we don't know. And I think all of these complexities are really, really, really important for us to just like hold in the room in the context of TDOR. I want to ask you a little bit about this TDOR in particular, because what people who are watching may not know is that you were, in addition to being the composer of this piece, which we all just heard, you also joined us in October, the performers who we're about to hear from, for a rehearsal, and you talked about the idea of tranifesting, or as you say, transifesting, because that's more comfortable to say. And I'll just briefly talk about this idea. I learned about this idea from C. Riley Snorton, who is a trans academic, and they talk about this idea that trans people are the carriers of a future that is worth living. And this idea of transifesting is I should try and quote this directly, a politic and a way of living, bringing into the future a way of living that we are collectively building communities that can sustain us in a future that is worth living. And I want to ask what you think about, what are trans people bringing into the future, particularly this year?
Oh, well, it's not particular to this year. It's
okay.
what trans people have been doing for generations. And that is demanding, this is my own thing that I come back to, but it's demanding more honesty of myself, and in doing so, inviting other people to explore their gender and demand more honesty of themselves. Because especially in this country, in the same way, there's this compulsive idea that you obviously must be heterosexual.
Okay.
It's the same thing. Like, you obviously must be a cisgender person. It's the assumption is not ever that, oh, of course, I'm going to have a gay child or a non-binary child. Like, that's not the compulsory thing. That's not like the default. And that's a problem, actually.
Yes.
Because we're not giving space to people to exist first. And I think trans people have to wrestle with certain questions that everybody should wrestle with for themselves.
Yes.
Just to express themselves and be their most honest version of themselves. And I also wanted to bring up the other part of the conversation from what we discussed that evening, which was the lesson of other people benefit from my benefiting. And just how do I say, owning that again, reclaiming it. Yes. Just because I feel like that has been stripped from many of us.
Yes.
And it sometimes does not feel right to have pleasure.
Okay.
To be in my body. And there's so many ideas and attitudes about trans bodies. So many. But really, the only ideas that matter are my own.
Okay, yes!
So,
about everything. The only ideas that matter are Mari's.
And if you like it, that's just extra.
Okay!
Well, I will share the wealth if I consent to
it. Yes. I'm going to start. That is my new politic. Going to this year, that's my new politic. If you like it, that's extra.
That's right. That's right. We got to, going back to this piece, we have to learn our actual history. And you hear a lot of talk about critical race theory, and it's just are we going to learn history or not history?
Yes, that's right.
Those are the two choices.
Yeah, I love a binary. That's a binary that I can get behind.
Do y'all have any more questions about the piece or about me or anything?
Yeah.
Concerns, thoughts, complaints?
I am always conscious about trans events, trans holidays. Am I allowed to say trans holidays? That feels.
I call them that. I literally call them holidays.
Okay, I'm glad it's not just me. I have to say, I'm getting tired of them. I feel like every year I perform these things for the trans holidays, and I speak and teach and music with things, and there's always this persistent cisgender gaze in the background of what is expected, and it's often not totally in alignment with how I'm thinking and feeling in that moment. And so one thing that I always like to do on the trans holidays is ask really specifically, do you have anything that you want to say to trans people? What, especially trans young people, the young people are close to my heart because I get to spend so much time with them. But
oh my gosh. I think the theme from today, having taught to trans people and done a presentation on trans voice pedagogy and choral pedagogy. That was my day today.
Okay.
Is that to be patient with yourself and demand those around you to be patient with you, or for them to be patient also with themselves as they understand you at a deeper level. Like, patience is so important to your survival if you're a young trans person, because you have the vision of who you are, but the resources to go to where you belong are not always obvious. They're not always affordable. You know, there's this idea of like separation from yourself. There's just like a default for trans people.
Yeah.
And don't give up, you know, be patient with yourself. And I wanted to comment on something that you said about these trans holidays, if I may.
Please.
Which is, it's the conundrum of like, we cannot expect cisgender people to be educated by trans people. Like, we cannot, they need to essentially do their own research.
Okay.
But, and here's the conundrum. Trans people are the best people to educate about trans experience.
Okay, yeah.
So you can go and get information and get the tea from your cisgender friends who have trans friends or have a trans friend. Like, what, like, that is some of the tea.
Yeah.
But you know, it's, I won't say you have to do this work, but you should be appreciated for it, because when you're a trans or non-binary person, you are the best person to speak to that experience.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, again, and I'm going to go back to race because I think Black people are not getting their fair share in general. But like, why are people having discussions about policies without a Black person in the room?
Yes.
Why are people discussing race politics or race theory without Black people in the room?
Okay, yes.
And I say that as somebody who's not Black.
Okay.
So, like, I get that, you know, and that's, it's a similar thing. Like, you want to have a trans person in the room, and maybe it's super uncomfortable for even the trans person to be there because of a history of being excluded or not being made to feel welcome. Like, I get that. But the conundrum exists that when you can get a trans person in the room, a lot of people will benefit from that.
That's right. Yes. So more trans people and more of the rooms. That's the lesson. That's the lesson. And more money. that's my thing. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to say that? More trans people, more rooms, and more money. Okay. I want to see more trans people in houses, more trans people being well fed. Like, shoot. That's what I want. That's my dream. I remember my first year with them youth ensemble. I felt like my like informal job was like, get trans people hired. Like, I remember after rehearsal or like between breaks on rehearsal, we would be like workshopping people's resumes. I was like, we're out here and we are getting jobs. You know? I'm like, I want you all to go out and get jobs, like get hired. And but there's more complexity to that, but we don't need to talk about that.
Well, when you're for young trans people, you know, like, you don't have to be a hero.
Okay. Yes.
You don't have to. You
Please.
still, if you don't go out and protest, if you don't, you know, create a nonprofit, if you end up not doing those things, like, you still deserve to like live and be happy and have pleasure and security.
Yes.
And not be harassed or, you know, raped or anything like that.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's just like, I feels like that shouldn't be controversial or radical to say, but it's like every trans person that I know is like an activist.
Truly though. But it's for our own survival, like we have to be. I remember,
that's the whole thing. I'm not an activist. I'm just trying to
yes,
survive.
yes.
Yeah.
It's like how many trans people in our workplaces are like our formal job title and then also the trans person, like a friend of mine calls themselves like professionally trans. Like in every situation, this is my job title and also I am the professional trans in the room, And yeah, thanks for saying that. We can free ourselves from being professionally trans. Like that, we do not have to do that. Shoot.
And on that note, I'm going to become irrelevant in the future. So I hope there will be an actual Black trans person to write music about Black trans experience.
Okay, amen. Yes.
Like I don't mean that to like say that this isn't a good piece of music or this wasn't worth it, because it 1,000% was. I'm just saying that like I'm trans, but I'm not Black.
Yeah.
And I'm doing my part to educate myself, and I hope that everybody else is. But I do not pretend for a second that that is my experience.
Thanks for saying that. It's so important. Mari, every time we talk, I have to tell everyone, every time I talk with Mari, it ends up being like 3 times longer than we had planned. And usually like 10 minutes into the conversation, it's like, we should be recording this for something, right?
But I didn't make you cry this time.
Not yet, but we got to turn off the Zoom call. Don't make me start. Oh, not before T-Door. Anyway.
I'm not violent. I'm just inspirational.
That's right. Just inspirational. I was thinking before this interview, I was like, I want to be like the flower girl in Mari's life. Like, I just want to follow you around and just like throw flowers, like the train of your dress. Like,
well,
that was my dream.
I don't know how I feel about marriage. I don't even know how I feel about monogamy. But if I do get married, you'll be invited.
Okay, well, not even married. I'm talking about what, like when you go to the grocery store. I want to be or like, yeah, that. Just like in general, Mari's just out on the town. I want to be there behind, throwing flowers to the wind. Miss Major said, "Give us our roses while we're still here." That's me to you, Mari. I'm just like throwing the
yes. Love to Miss Major. She just had surgery.
Yes, amen. Yes,
but she's doing okay. Again, she's doing okay, y'all.
That's our like ritual for tonight. Like hope and wellness to Miss Major.
Yes.
So. Thank you so much, Mari. And I'm really glad that we get to share this world together and that all of the people watching get to hear all of your brilliant wisdom.
Can I say one last thing?
Anything. Yes, always.
Because people, since this piece has been written and been distributed to the choirs who participated, like I've had other choirs take interest in performing it already.
Yes.
And I've had an opportunity to discuss it in more depth. And it's just the reason that I do this work and that I think it matters so much is because we're taking words from trans people. And I include Amir Rabia, who is another poet that I collaborate with regularly. We're taking the words of trans people and engraving them into music. And yes, it's my music, but when you sing these words, you are absorbing a piece, a sliver of the reality of a trans person who is a trailblazer and a survivor and somebody who has dreams and is fighting for their own life. And that maybe, if you're a cisgender white person, if you're heterosexual, if you're like, this piece is still for you.
That's right.
And having Dane's words or Amir's words or my words pass through your lips is like a magical spell. If you let it be, it can be, to share a story that not enough people have heard, and to almost like a prayer, like wish into existence a richer life for everybody around you. You know what I mean?
Mari, that's transifesting. Transifesting.
That's transifesting. but it's just really like there's something like singing choral music is like witchcraft.
Okay, yes.
Because I know when I'm like up close to y'all that y'all have different voices and y'all are singing together, but y'all have different voices. But when I walk away from the choir and you are one energy, like, how can you tell me that's not magical?
Amen. It is.
And if you're singing trans music, that's trans magic.
Okay, yes. That's trans magic, everyone. Wow. Who knew? Witchcraft on Tidor. Cool. Thank you so much.